our friend. Hi, our family member. And hi, the love of our lives. Yes, you. The same you that has subscribed to our YouTube channel. You are our darling. And we love, love, love you a lot. My name is Faith Martins, and this right here is Serenity TV. Can you see what I'm putting on? A shade. I'm not shading nobody, but hey, I am wearing a shade. Okay, so somebody in the studio said, this shade no fit you. Come out, Sam. I don't know. Do you agree? Do you agree to what he said? Because me, I love it on me. Today, we are going to be discussing something very important. It's supposed to be a serious conversation, but trust me when I say we are not going to make anything serious out of it. We're just going to flow as it comes, okay? But it's going to be really, really important that you listen till the very end. If you've not subscribed to our YouTube channel, go right now and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have I told you my name? Let me tell you again. My name is Faith Martins. I love my name. Today in the studio, we're being joined by no other person than Chimezie Ebosie. I feel like I keep murdering your name every time.
Again, all the time.
I apologize.
It's Ebosie.
Ebosie. But that was what I said.
No, you didn't
What did I
say.
say?
You didn't say Ebosie. I didn't know. It didn't sound like what you said was Ebosie, but you didn't say Ebosie. So my name is
Ebosie.
Chimezie Ebosie. Yes.
Hi, Chimezie. How
Thank
are you doing?
I'm fine, and
Welcome.
your shade is actually fine, right?
Oh,
Yes,
thanks.
yes.
Somebody said it's not, but thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. So how have you been? What's up?
I'm good. Yeah. I'm happy to be here again. And
Again, yeah.
I'm looking forward to a wonderful conversation.
Of course, it's going to definitely be a wonderful conversation. The topic that we're going to be discussing today is going to make it a wonderful conversation because it's a conversation that is going to create so much awareness and help people understand that this is how it ought to be and not the other way around. So once again, I welcome you to Serenity TV studio.
Thank you.
Okay, so today, viewers, what we want to discuss on is voters registration. Now, voter registration is key in our conversation today because a few months from now, by January 16th, or is it 12th of January, we are going to have an election being conducted here in Nigeria. The presidential election is going to be somewhere around January, and then once it is February, we're going to have the governorship and House of Assembly election to be conducted. So it is really paramount that we discuss voter registration. Subsequently, in the previous years, in 2023 to be precise, we've had lots of, what would I call it, setback? Maybe not setback, but lagging behind from Nigerians, citizens who are supposed to come register for their voters card, citizens who are supposed to be very compliant. We had a little bit of, little or no form of interest from these citizens. There were less voters who came to register for their cards, and this is a problem because unfortunately we're sort of seeing the same events play right before our eyes over again, and that is what we are trying to see if we can address and sort of nip in the bud, as I would say. Now, Chimezie, I think you have been at the hems of affair when it comes to INEC, voters registration and all of that. And I just want to ask you, you've made your research. I mean, you work with budgets. One of your job is to make researches, and I've always known you to be that kind of a person. Now, my question to you is, what is your take on voters registration or the turnout on voters registration in this year, 2026? As opposed to in 2023, when we had the last presidential election?
Okay, all right, thank you. So, the truth is that the turnout has not been very encouraging. I could remember 2022. I was on ground. I was one of the youth mobilizers. So, in 2022, I started a movement called Zuko Imo Youth. So that movement was to mobilize young Imolites who just turned 18 to register, to get their voters card and pick up their PVC to vote in the last election. So in the last election, there was a lot of motivation. There was a lot of enthusiasm. 2022 election period before the election was 2023. So the years leading to the election, there was a lot of motivation.
Ginger.
There was a lot of ginger on radio. Like people brought out their funds to mobilize people to go and register to get their PVCs. But then we are not seeing that level of motivation again. We are not seeing that level of commitment. We are not seeing that enthusiasm again. Last 2 weeks or last week thereabout, INEC in Imo State opened 2 mega registration centers, one at Azomta Cathedral and the other one at Imo State University. We were on ground. We went there to check what was up, and people were not turning up. Right? I mean, people were not turning up to come and register to vote, and they even had to open extra mega stations in Futo and other places. But the turn up has not been much. But then I think probably because there's still time. So we are currently in the second phase of the voters registration. The first phase started August 15th and ended around December. Then the second phase started January 5th. It will end around somewhere in April. Then the third phase will start around May and end in August. So probably because of time, I know one thing with Nigerians, we like to rush. We'll wait for late hours to rush and go and register to get our PVCs, right? So yeah, probably because there's still time, people I feel like, okay, there's still more time for me to go and register. But then this is actually the best time for people to go and register and get their PVC, because if you go around the registration centers, there are no queues. You could just go there and just there are 2 or 3 persons. Like you can even go there, they are not doing anything. So you just go there in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most. You're done. You register and you go. You don't have to wait until when you come and queue up under the sun or under the rain to get to register to vote and all of that. Yeah. So the numbers, talking about numbers, so far only about 1,200,000 and something people have successfully registered. So
Here in Imo?
No, not in Imo. In Nigeria as a whole. Yes. 1.2 million, 2 million persons.
Really
that's really low. I've registered so far. I've completed the registration. So you can start the registration online on INEC portal, civra.inecnigeria.org. You can start the registration there. But until you have gone to the INEC center to thumbprint and to do a first capture, that is when you've completed your registration.
Let me butt in a little bit in here. Now, one of the things you've mentioned is maybe the reason is because Nigerians like to take things serious when it's already late and all of that. But however, you also mentioned a sort of excitement, sort of energy that was experienced in 2021, 2022, this year's leading to the election which happened in 2023. Yeah. But we're no longer, I mean, election is next year.
Yeah.
January
16th.
Do you understand?
Yes.
We have few more months, and the enthusiasm that you talk about, the excitement that you talk about, we are not seeing it happen. So do you think it is because Nigerians are waiting until it is late before they register? Or do you think, I'm just saying, do you think it's because people's hope have been dashed and right now everybody is just, literally so completely unperturbed, for lack of better words?
Yes, so the truth is that many people lost hope after the last election. Many persons' hope were dashed, right? Myself inclusive, and because the electoral umpire, which was INEC, promised us a particular method they were going to use, right? They told us they were going to transmit results electronically. In fact, even the INEC chairman went to Chatham House in UK, said it openly, and I mean, people were excited, right? But then what we saw on the election day was different, especially on the presidential election, right? The BVAS machines were not working. Because I say this because I was on ground. So last election, I worked with European Union Election Observation Mission. Yeah. So, during election, international organizations send their observers to come and observe election in Nigeria. Africa Union sends theirs. I think the British High Commission send theirs, because, Britain is no longer part of the European Union. So Britain sends their own observation team as well. Then European Union also have their own observation mission team. So I was part of them. I worked as an assistant to a long-term observers deployed to not Imo State, University. Then I was in Rivers State, so I worked with them. So we were on ground to observe what was happening, the process before the election, on the election, and even after the election. So I'm speaking from experience. So INEC, there was a lot of motivation, there were a lot of enthusiasm because of the promise of technology, right? And the technology actually worked, right? But then for the presidential election, it didn't work. But for National Assembly, it worked. For governorship, it worked. But what was the reason? So people lost hope after the last election, and I think that's the number one reason why people are not motivated to go out and register to vote. And I mean, I am actually scared because next election we might have lower turnout in voters. Yeah. Now, if you observe in the last four to three general elections, the numbers keep reducing. The last election, the total vote cast in the last election was about 25 million out of 93 million registered voters. Before now, in 2019, the total vote cast was around 29 million in 2019. In 2015, it was around 30 million, 31 million thereabout. But then, as new elections come, the numbers reduce, and because of people have lost hope in the electoral umpire, in the electoral system. And I mean, there have been efforts to try to, correct the wrongs, which what you saw the saga that happened at the National Assembly with the new the electoral amendment bill, that's the House of Rep made it mandatory to there should be real-time electronic transmission of results. But National Assembly said you can transmit results when there is no networking where you are. You can now rely on the paperwork. So that still leaves room for controversies and ambiguity. So people are already protesting. Okay, it doesn't even seem like there will be sort kind of an election come 2027. So number one issue is that people have lost hope in the electoral system. And I mean, even myself as a civil society actor, as a civic actor, sometimes I get demoralized. But then I find encouragement that the best way most of these politicians rig election is when the turnout in elections is very low, right? It's very difficult to rig election when the numbers are much. But if you have in a country of 93 million registered voters, only 25 million voted, I mean, you can manipulate the numbers. But when 50 million people turned out to vote, I mean, where do you even start manipulating?
Exactly.
So people need to understand that it's easier for politicians to rig election when the voter turnout is low than when it's high. So we should find that motivation there. And if we just fold our hands and say we are not voting, I mean, you ask yourself, are you happy with the way this country is being run? Has your life improved in the last 2 years or 3 years? Have your income improved? I mean, we ask your security of lives and property, has it improved in the last 2-3 years? So if you're comfortable, fine. But if you're not comfortable, it is a more reason for you to turn out, go out, get your PVC and register to vote in the last election. So the major reason for me is that lack of the distrust in the electoral umpire, and also the fact that we wait till late hours before we start. Everybody starts registering and start running helter-skelter to do one or two things.
Okay, so I would want this last point that you made. I would want us to explore it much more broader, in a broader format, because that's something that we get to talk about, but we do not get to highlight on it in a broad format. However, let's talk about the electoral umpire. An electoral umpire is, we already talk about the distrust that people feel towards, the strategies that they employ. Now, let's talk about INEC. INEC is supposed to be a system that gives the people exactly what they want. It is supposed to be a body that delivers the masses' intent and what they actually cry and clamor for. If there is anybody in Nigeria that is supposed to be giving us exactly what we ask for, it should be INEC. They have a huge role to play, but unfortunately, lots of Nigerians have a problem with this body. There are lots of things that are being, made compulsory by INEC that should not be. There are lots of statements that are being put out that should not be put out. There are lots of strategies that are being employed that should not be employed. So all of this is a problem. How do we begin to navigate the trust of the people towards INEC? How do we get INEC to listen to the voice of the people and work for Nigerians? Yes. Because right now I don't see it working for Nigerians. Parties.
Exactly. So
just so I could add to that, we are also going to talk about the president of the country employing the INEC chairman.
Yes, I was going to start.
Let us highlight on that.
I'm going to start from that. So, so some of us in the civil society space is actually been what we've been advocating for.
Yeah.
So we will, part of the electoral reform bill which we are pushing was that they should strip the power of the president to appoint the INEC chairman. Right. There should be an independent body or another mechanism for appointing the INEC chairman. Because I mean, if the president appoints the INEC chairman, I mean,
you're loyal to the president.
I mean, you want to do his bidding, right? So but we were not successful in our last advocacy, like in the last electoral reform we were proposing, and it didn't happen, right? So I think we need to start from there. We need to strip the presidency. I mean, I think another problem we have in Nigeria is that the president holds too much power. there's so much concentration of power on the president's hand,
Yeah.
right? And you
And
see,
that's destructive.
that's disruptive. You just saw like in what is happening in America.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court has the tariff that the president imposed on the country. The
Yeah.
Supreme Court overturned it, right?
Exactly.
So how often do you see Supreme Court, a president gives an order or does something, the court turns it down? It hardly happens in Nigeria
Yeah.
because the president hosts to even the judiciary is the president that say appoint the
Exactly.
chief justice
The
of the
chief
country.
justice
So
of the
we
country.
need to practice true federalism.
Mm-hmm.
We need to reduce the power of the president to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
So on INEC specifically, I've mentioned one is, like I mentioned, to start from stripping the president the power of appointing whoever is INEC chairman, and maybe that there could be an independent body that does that, and maybe the National Assembly endorses, scrutinizes. But without a National Assembly, whoever the president sends, hardly do you see anybody that the president sends to the National Assembly for endorsement, approval for any appointment, and they reject that person, right? So let's start from that too. Secondly, I think another issue is not just INEC. So INEC work based on the constitution, based on a guideline they have, right? They were set up by the constitution. So I think emphasis should be on the National Assembly. If the National Assembly had passed the law that electronic transmission of results must be compulsory, INEC have no option than to abide by that by whatever the National Assembly has agreed on. So emphasis should be on the National Assembly. They have more power to cause change. They have more power to influence, because it was a law that set up INEC. So it's a law that will set up the guidelines, how INEC will operate, whether how voters registration will be done, how all of that will be done. So I think the National Assembly needs to wake up. National Assembly people there are our representatives, right? People who are in the in INEC are people who are employed to work, and those appointed by the government. But those who are actually the voice of the people are the National Assembly. So they should listen. It's so unfortunate that the current National Assembly we have and their leadership are not actually people oriented, especially the Senate. I just mentioned the issue with the new electoral bill. The House of Rep passed that there should be mandatory electronic transmission of results in real time, but the Senate rejected. I know the Senate is the higher house than the House of Rep, right? The Senate rejected. So we have a National Assembly that does not listen to Nigerians. We have a National Assembly that is, well, I would like to say anti-people, right? Because I mean, you've seen Nigerians say that this is what we want. They were protesting at the National Assembly, right?
Yeah.
People were protesting. And this is what, and you know, this was what caused problem in the last election. And because they don't want a free and fair election, that is why they want the status quo to remain. So yeah, the National Assembly has a work to do. The president also has a work to do, or he has to do also I think the National Assembly is because it's still the National Assembly that will strip the president's power from appointing INEC chairman. So emphasis should be on the National Assembly, and I think Nigerians should take note the kind of persons we elect as our representative, because those are why do we have representatives? Because all of us cannot be at the National Assembly. So the 2,000 of us living in a community, in a ward, okay, you Chimeze or you Faith, all of us cannot go out to Abuja. You go and represent us, speak on our behalf. But unfortunately, when these people go there, they don't speak on behalf of the people. So the INEC will only operate based on the guidelines that was given to you or that have been passed. But then we know what happens with our electoral system. So emphasis on the National Assembly. Yeah.
All
then
right.
I also like to come back on the conversation on voters registration.
Yeah.
One of the issues we had in the last election, I was sharing this experience with somebody. In the last election, we had 9.4 or 9 million newly registered voters in the last election, and many of them were young people, right? And if you observe during the last election, during the last registration, around 2021, 2022, schools were on strike. They had this long strike that they had that period. But then after the strike was called off, many of the students went back to school. So one of the reasons why there was low voter turnout, or why people there was no high number of vote cast, because now imagine if I was at home and I registered at home, and maybe I'm from Imo State and I schooled in Akwa Ibom, right? And after the strike was called off, I had to go back to school in Akwa Ibom. The voters card I use in registering in Imo State, I can't use it. I can't use it there in Akwa Ibom. I would have to transfer my polling unit from Imo State to Akwa Ibom. But then if INEC had closed the portal, I can't do that. So in fact, if you look at our number of total registered voters, so Nigeria has currently after the last election 2023, we had we have currently have 93 million registered voters, and youth students specifically make up 28% of that population. So that's about 26 million of 93 registered voters are students, right? And I know one thing with students. As a student, you will not be a student forever. If you're a student in 2023, you will not be a student again in 2027. You might have moved, right? And not everybody might have that zeal to, okay, because I'm in a new location, I would have to change my voters card. So there's something we've suggested for INEC to do. One of it is to make this voters registration make it open all year round. Like, I mean, why do you have to wait for like 1 year or 2 years before election before you open it? Why not? I can wake up any day and go to NIN and get my NIN.
Yeah.
Why can't I, once I turn 18, go and register and get my voters card? Why must I wait till when is election period before I can do that? Another thing we also suggest is that just like you have your ATM card, let's say I have my ATM card and I have 10,000 naira in my ATM card. If I withdraw 10,000 naira in Imo State, I can't go to another state and withdraw another 10,000 because I've withdrawn that 10,000. You can use your ATM card anywhere in Nigeria. So why can't I use my voters card anywhere in Nigeria, right? Because I mean, where I was in 2023 may not be where I will be in 2027. And even if, for instance, now, even where election is happening January 2023, I'm in December 2026, I might be in Owerri.
Yeah, but don't you think it's because they are compiling a list that they work with, just so that when you come there, you can definitely see your name and all of that?
Yes, they have a list they work with, and I understand. But then, I mean, with technology, these things are easy to do, right? I mean, what does it take to... You can, and even the last election, what happened in the last election, the Electoral Act mandated that INEC will keep the voters registration open till 90 days before the election. But that didn't happen. INEC closed the registration about 6 months before the election, and that was against what was written in the Electoral Act, right? So yes, and we know they have enough time, but then if they can make it open, let's even start with that after the 2023 election, there was no voters registration until they started last year August. So 2023 election ended March. 2023 there was no new voters registration. 2024 there was no new. 2025 there was no new. It's only 2026 August that they started. Right. So people who are turned 18 these 3 years past or 2 years past would have to now start registering this. So why not keep it open all year round? These people will have the freedom, the time to go and register. Then maybe 6 months or 3 months before election, you can now close it and now print out your list for whatever you want to do with it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Umeze. This has been a very deep conversation, very important conversation, and I'm glad that we had it today. One of the things I'm going to say, let me remove my shade and say it. What I want to say is, please go and register. Go get your card. Go get your PVC. Please. You see, I remove shade, talk I beg. Go get your PVC. I understand the discrepancies around, voting and all of that. But it's important that you note that, exactly as you said, if you do not vote, what will happen will still happen. Exactly. It's even easier for it to happen.
And I was making analysis recently. Come to think of it, when was the last time we had a population census in Nigeria? Last time we had a population census was 2006. So this is making it 20 years since the last time we did a head count of how many Nigerians are. So we've just been working with population estimates. We are just, some persons will tell you we are 200 million, we are 220 million, we are 233. Something happened. The presidency posted something last December. The hands of the president posted something last December about our population, and it cited an American think tank organization. So that means even as a country, you are not even sure of the data. You have to cite.
Was it the advertising thing?
No. They were talking about how many our population, our diversity, how many percent we are Christian. I think 51% of Nigerians we are Muslims, 48 are Christians, 1% are non-religious. And so, but how did they get that figure, or how did they get that percentage? They were citing an international organization's source of data. So even you as a country, you don't have a source of data. So the only data that might be accurate that might be accurate in it, that might be our voters register, right? Because I mean, we do voters registration every 4 years. When it gets to election period, we do new voters. INEC audits the register of voters, remove people who are dead and all of that. So that might be the only accurate. And resources are also shared based on population, right? So for me, I think this is another thing we need to leverage on. We've not had population census in 20 years, and that data might not be accurate. So daily data is the voters register. So you need to go, and if you are not registering, we are doing ourselves more harm than good. Right?
Yeah.
So please, if you've not gotten your PVC, please go out there and go and register. You can register online on INEX. Because I mean, I belong to this school of thought that believes that everything rises and falls on leadership. You may think that politics doesn't affect you. You may think that leadership doesn't affect you. Even here we are. If you have a government that is anti-people, they can come here and close the studio. You might have your business is thriving, and government comes and closes down your business. Right? So
it affects you one way or the
leadership
other.
affects you. So the people who you have to be sure the kind of persons who you put in those positions who will now make decisions that in turn affect your life, right? So, and how do you put them in power? It is through just that paper, through that thumbprint, and you don't have any excuse not to go and get your voters
card. Did you hear that? Register. I had to remove my shade just for that. Please and please and please make sure you register. Do not allow your right as a citizen to be trampled on just because this did not happen the way you want it to happen. The previous election date does not mean that you cannot change the way things should happen this time around. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Chimezie, for coming into the studio to discuss with us. I felt like we went through election classes and we came back successfully. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Have yourself a wonderful, fantastic, let me wear my glass and tell you bye. Bye.